Hello, this is Sue Lloyd, Vice Chair of the ISSB, and I'm pleased to be here today with our Chair, Emmanuel Faber.
Hello, Sue. It's nice to have you here in Frankfurt with me, and welcome all to this special Christmas edition. Sue, over to you about what we're going to speak about today.
Great. So today we're going to talk about the latest news from our work over the last few weeks at the ISSB, give you a bit of colour from our December ISSB board meeting, and reflect a bit on our progress this year and peep ahead a bit to early 2025. So before we get into Board Week, Emmanuel, last week we held our ISSB Investor Advisory Group meeting in London, and it was great to see you there in person. Can you tell us a little bit about that meeting?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sue. Well, the IAG, as we call it, is a critical body that helps us in our standard setting process, working on the adoption of the ISSB standards, but even before they are adopted in the construction of the standards, because those standards are for the use of investors, and it's a group of leading asset owners and asset managers in various markets committed to improving the quality and comparability of sustainability-related financial disclosures. It was really interesting to hear the feedback about the need for greater alignment of standards in the market, as the risk for fragmentation is still there, and to make it easier for both preparers and investors to make better decisions, the need for supporting a global baseline of disclosure. So really committed conversations last week in London. Maybe, Sue, now that we are in Frankfurt, what about this week?
Yes, so here for our December board meeting. So we talked about our new standard setting and research work. And in particular this time, the staff gave us an update on the research that we're working on at the moment on our human capital project. The staff gave us an update on that project, including explaining evidence that they've been gathering about investor interest in information about human capital and how that affects entities' prospects and how that information is used by investors. And we also had a presentation about evidence of the effects of human capital related risks and opportunities on entities' prospects, with a number of really interesting case studies of sort of real world scenarios of where companies were affected by good and bad things happening from a human capital perspective. And we also talked about the work that we're doing on our ISSB standards, with the staff giving us an update on their outreach there and what they've been hearing as we look at the work to enhance the ISSB standards. And listeners might remember that we've decided to take a phased approach to enhancing the standards, starting with 12 ISSB standards that we've agreed to work on first in priority. And the staff are busy working away behind the scenes and talking to our stakeholders as we look at developing materials towards an exposure draft of proposed amendments to the standards. And it was really great to hear what people have been telling us about what's good and what's missing in the current ISSB standards, areas for potential enhancements. And I think we had a really good discussion as a board, both to understand some of the feedback for areas of enhancement, talking quite a bit about the sort of philosophy and thinking about how the ISSB standards would be used not just in isolation anymore, but in combination with the IFRS S1 and S2. So you get this information from IFRS S1 about governance, strategy and risk management that's really complemented by the ISSB standards, which really help identify risks and opportunities and really help build out the metrics piece of the disclosures. So that was really important. And we had an interesting discussing about sort of some of the pros and cons of the level of granularity and specificity around some of the metrics in the ISSB standards. So hopefully we were useful for the staff in terms of giving them lots of things to think about as they further progress that work. So a good board meeting, and I think good progress on those new streams of work. So that was the last board meeting of 2024. And it's certainly been a super busy year for us at the ISSB. And perhaps, Emmanuel, it's a good moment for you to look back and sort of reflect on the big moments of the last 12 months.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. And yeah, I have to say that beyond the technical work that you've highlighted, with this last board week of the year, that year has really been the year of adoption. If I remember, here in Frankfurt in December 2023, we had around 10 jurisdictions indicating being on the journey of adoption. We're one year later, and we have more than 30 jurisdictions on the journey. And the chair of ISCO yesterday or the day before, reflecting during the IFRS conference that those make up approximately 58% of global GDP and over half of global greenhouse gas emissions, over 40% of global market capitalization. So this is really encouraging to see progress made, and in particular because we see the prospects of a global baseline being connecting major economic blocks as well as EMDEs, given the very diverse group of those 30 jurisdictions from G7, G20, EMDs, Global South, with Global South being more than 2/3 in total of those jurisdictions. Very impressive diversity. And we see investors and companies, calling on jurisdictions to adhere closely to the ISSB standards when they consult. That's been the case all over the place, to a point that nearly all of the 30 jurisdictions are designing a pathway that will lead to the delivery of the ISSB's global baseline of disclosures, which is truly, unexpected as an initial result. When I think about, all the jurisdictions that are currently either have finalized or will finalize their climate standards, would go for Scope 1, 2, and Scope 3 without exception as a target for their adoption pathway, which really speaks, I think, to the proportionality and scalability that through either structural reliefs or transitional reliefs, we've been able to bring this, I think, sweet spot of both competitiveness and transparency that our standards are bringing for both reporters, preparers, basically, and investors. That came with a lot of efforts in the support for implementation. Ensuring high quality implementation is critical, given the first countries are starting. Some mandatory, like Turkey, others are, on a permitting pathway for the time being before becoming mandatory, like Brazil, Nigeria, and others. And I'm really happy that we published, of course, educational materials on several topics, including the current and anticipated financial effects, a guide that helps companies identify and disclose material information more recently, and of course the interoperability guidance for companies that apply the ISSB standard and the ISRS, which we jointly published with EFRAG in May. Last point I would make about this year has been the really strong investment that we made with partners on capacity building and outreach for effective implementation. More than 16,000 stakeholders reached this year, and nearly close to 50 members now of the capacity building partnership framework. So this is really what I would highlight, and I think it paves the way for an incredibly active year next year. So one thing that I would maybe would like to highlight as well, Sue, is this year has been a year where we embedded connectivity in our technical agenda with sort of a free range of activities that we would always want to keep open in our resources to welcome work with our sister board. And I'm saying this because that is an increasing topic for us, and I'd like to get your own reflections as we approach the end of this year on that particular important topic.
Yes, sure. So connectivity is really fundamental to everything we do at the foundation now, and I'm not just saying that because I used to be the vice chair of the sister board, but because I think we hear it all over the place when we're talking to our stakeholders who really want to be sure that we are focusing on making sure that preparers that use both IFRS accounting standards and the ISSB standards can do well, it works well together, and that investors get a great package of information when they use both sets of standards. So it's really fundamental to all of the work that we're doing. And we've done more this year. We had a great session at the World Standard Setters meeting back in September. And you can see interoperability live, not just in S1 and S2, but also, for example, in the ED that the IASB put out a while ago on climate-related and other risks and uncertainties and the examples they propose. And we know there's increasing demand from our stakeholders to really understand what we're doing on the connectivity front. And in response to that demand, soon, we're going to have a new page on our website and a new webcast series where people will be able to go and find all of our resources to do with connectivity in one place so that they can see what we're really up to easily, given we get lots and lots of questions about it. And so that's 2024. Emmanuel, if we look at 2025, what's on the horizon for the ISSB?
Well, as you know, Sue, the horizon has already been, very, very full of new things. So maybe I'll focus on the immediate part of 2025, so the first half. I think our audience and stakeholders, all of you, will probably see us work on our new projects on the agenda with the next phase in the first half. That will include further support and adoption and implementation of S1 and S2 and new educational materials, which we would expect on important topics like proportionality or scenario analysis and the way to apply them in a way that allows assertion of compliance with S1 and S2. We would also expect continued core focus on our technical agenda, and which I would highlight two particular ones. Transition plan disclosures, which we took responsibility from the UK TPT in June, and that we are going to elevate as proper and full fledged ISSB educational material on transition plan disclosures. There is a huge need from the market. Every month is adding to the pressure from the market for us to deliver that. And so we're going to commit the appropriate resources to do that in the first half of 2025, the next 6 months. And another important one that we've already flagged previously is that we will work on the enhancements of some of the 12 standards for SASB that you've highlighted for our current agenda of work, and targeting exposure drafts on those in the first half of next year. Also, probably important for our stakeholders to expect ongoing work on interoperability and connectivity as we go.
Underpinning everything we do. So that's it, I think, for us for 2024. And next month we'll be back again in Frankfurt. So I look forward to updating podcast listeners in the new year. Happy festive period for those celebrating. And I think we should end our podcast the way we end our board meetings with a...
Thank you, Sue, for ringing the bell of the last board meeting. We'll be back in January. Thank you. Merry Christmas to all.
For the latest developments from either the International Sustainability Standards Board or the International Accounting Standards Board, make sure to subscribe on the IFRS Foundation website, www.ifrs.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please take some time to rate, review, and subscribe on your preferred podcast player.